Prologue. 20 years ago. The screams echoing through the Silverwood Pack's territory that night would haunt the survivors for decades. 7-year-old Aurelia pressed herself deeper into the hollow of the ancient oak, her small body trembling as shadows danced between the trees. The acrid smell of smoke and blood filled her nostrils, mixing with something else. Something wrong. Magic. Dark magic that made her skin crawl and her emerging hybrid powers recoil in terror. "Stay hidden," her mother had whispered, eyes wild with panic as she shoved Aurelia into the tree's embrace. "No matter what you hear, don't come out until dawn." But now, as inhuman howls pierced the night and the metallic tang of death grew stronger, Aurelia wasn't sure dawn would ever come. A twig snapped nearby. Then another. She held her breath, pressing her hands against the rough bark until splinters bit into her palms. Through the gap in the tree trunk, she watched 3 figures emerge from the smoke, 2 wolves flanking a woman whose eyes glowed with unnatural purple light. The witch's lips moved in a soundless chant, and wherever her gaze fell, the very earth seemed to wither. "The hybrid child," the witch hissed, her voice like winter wind through dead leaves. "Where is she?" One of the wolves shifted, becoming a man with cruel yellow eyes. "The bloodline ends tonight. Every last trace of their cursed magic dies with them." Aurelia's heart hammered so loudly she was certain they could hear it. Her fingernails began to extend into claws, a sign her powers were responding to fear, and she bit down on her tongue to keep from whimpering. That's when she saw him. A boy, perhaps 11 or 12, moved like liquid shadow between the trees. His dark hair caught the moonlight, and even at her young age, Aurelia could sense the power radiating from him. An alpha's power. But there was something else in his scent, something that called to the wild magic in her blood. The witch's head snapped toward his location, but the boy was already moving. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a fallen branch and hurled it in the opposite direction. The crash echoed through the forest. "There!" The witch pointed, and the 2 wolves bolted toward the sound. The boy waited until they disappeared into the undergrowth, then turned directly toward Aurelia's hiding place. Their eyes met through the gap in the tree, and she saw something that would stay with her forever. A depth of understanding that seemed impossible in someone so young, and a fierce protectiveness that made her chest tight with unnamed emotion. He pressed a finger to his lips, then melted back into the shadows. By dawn, the attackers were gone. By noon, rescue parties found the survivors, including one small hybrid girl who would never speak of the boy who saved her, because she convinced herself he had been nothing more than a fever dream, born of terror. But dreams don't leave behind the scent of pine and winter storms. Dreams don't whisper promises in the dark that someday, when the moon is full and the world needs them most, they'll find each other again. 20 years later, at a mating ritual that would change everything, that promise would finally come due. Chapter 1. The Sanctuary. The scent of chamomile and wolfsbane filled the air as Aurelia's fingers worked their magic. Not the supernatural kind that marked her as different, but the healing touch that had earned her grudging respect among the Silverwood Pack. "Easy now," she whispered to the injured wolf sprawled across her examination table. The creature's amber eyes watched her warily, pupils dilated with pain. A deep gash ran along his flank, too precise to be from a territorial dispute. Someone had done this deliberately. The wolf wasn't pack. His scent carried the wild freedom of the unclaimed lands, that sharp tang of pine and danger that spoke of a life lived on the edges. Like her. Aurelia's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning the wound while her mind wandered to darker places. Why would someone hurt a lone wolf? The question gnawed at her as she reached for the silver-threaded needle, one of the few tools that could stitch supernatural flesh without rejection. "This might sting," she murmured, though she knew he couldn't understand her human words in his current form. The bell above her shop door chimed softly. Aurelia's mother, Elena, stepped inside carrying a basket of fresh herbs from their garden. The older woman's silver-streaked hair caught the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and her knowing eyes immediately assessed the situation. "Another stray?" Elena asked, setting down her basket. Injured. Deliberately. Aurelia's voice carried an edge that made her mother pause. Elena moved closer, studying the wolf's wounds with the eye of someone who'd seen too much violence. The cuts are too clean, too purposeful. Her fingers traced the air above the gashes without touching. Someone's sending a message. A chill ran down Aurelia's spine. Messages in their world were rarely kind, especially for outcasts like them. She focused on her stitching, each pull of the thread precise and gentle. The wolf's breathing gradually steadied under her care. There. Aurelia stepped back, admiring her handiwork. The wound was closed, the bleeding stopped. You'll live to fight another day. The wolf's amber eyes met hers, and for a moment, she could have sworn she saw gratitude there. Then he was moving, fluid grace despite his injury, leaping through the open window and disappearing into the forest beyond. Elena watched the wolf vanish, then turned to her daughter with concern creasing her features. The mating ritual is tomorrow night. Aurelia's stomach dropped like a stone thrown into deep water. She'd been dreading this conversation for weeks, hoping her mother would forget, or that some miracle would cancel the ancient ceremony. I know, she said quietly, beginning to clean her instruments with unnecessary vigor. You can't avoid it forever, my darling. Elena's voice carried the weight of maternal worry. The pack expects me to be rejected. The words came out sharper than Aurelia intended. She softened her tone because her mother didn't deserve her anger. We both know what will happen tomorrow night, Mama. I'm a hybrid, half wolf, half witch. The moon goddess doesn't make mates for creatures like me. Elena's hand found her daughter's shoulder, squeezing gently. You are more powerful than any of them realize, more beautiful, more worthy of love than... more dangerous, Aurelia finished. Don't forget that part. The older woman sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of her daughter's jaw. 27 years old and still protecting herself with thorns like a wild rose. Just keep an open heart tomorrow night. Sometimes the moon goddess surprises us. Aurelia nodded, though her heart felt anything but open. It felt locked away, buried under years of suspicious glances and whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. As her mother gathered the soiled bandages, Aurelia caught sight of her reflection in the window glass. Dark hair that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Eyes that shifted between deep green and amber depending on her mood. Features that were too sharp, too otherworldly for pure werewolf blood. Tomorrow night she would stand before the entire pack during the full moon. She would wait for a mate who would never come, or worse, one who would take one look at her hybrid nature and turn away in disgust. Either way, by tomorrow's dawn, her lonely existence would be confirmed once and for all. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Silverwood territory reeked of rust and betrayal. Cale Blackthorn stood in the shadows, his handsome features twisted with an ugliness that no amount of genetic perfection could hide. Across from him, two figures waited. A rival pack alpha whose scent carried the metallic tang of violence, and a woman whose purple-tinged eyes marked her as something far more dangerous than any shifter. You're certain she'll be there tomorrow night? The rival alpha's voice was gravelly, like stones grinding together. Cale's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. Aurelia has never missed a mating ritual. She stands there every year like a lamb waiting for slaughter, hoping this time will be different. His hands clenched into fists. This time, it will be. The witch stepped forward, her movements unnaturally fluid. Dark magic clung to her like perfume, sickly sweet and dangerous. And you're prepared to reject your true mate? The bond will fight you, boy. Fated connections aren't easily severed. I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. Cale's voice dropped to a growl. My father died because of the royal family's so-called justice. Adrian Nightfall executed him like a common criminal, all for the crime of seeking a better life for our pack. What he didn't mention, what he'd never admit aloud, was that his father had been caught selling pack secrets to human hunters. The execution had been swift and merciful compared to what traitors usually faced. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," the witch purred, her fingers trailing over a small vial filled with swirling black liquid. "But this will make it unforgettable." The rival Alpha leaned forward, his scarred face hungry with anticipation. When Adrian's authority is questioned, when his pack sees him as weak for failing to protect one of his subjects from public humiliation, the other packs will lose faith, Cale finished. Challenges will come. His reign will crumble. His smile turned predatory. "And I'll be there to pick up the pieces." The witch uncorked the vial, and the scent that escaped made all three of them recoil. It smelled like rotting flowers and broken promises. "One drop of this in your drink before the ceremony, and you'll feel nothing when you reject her. No bond, no pain, no regret." Cale reached for the vial, then hesitated. For just a moment, a memory surfaced. A young girl with kind eyes helping him bandage a scraped knee when they were children. Aurelia had been different even then, but she'd been sweet, innocent. He crushed the memory like glass under his heel. Perfect. He pocketed the vial, his resolve hardening like steel. Tomorrow night, Aurelia's humiliation will be the first crack in Adrian Nightfall's empire. The witch's laughter echoed through the warehouse, cold and sharp as winter wind. "Just remember our deal, young Alpha. When Adrian falls, the Nightfall bloodline's magical artifacts become mine. All of them." "Done." Kyle's eyes glowed amber in the darkness. "After tomorrow night, everything changes." As the three conspirators melted back into the shadows, none of them noticed the small bat hanging from the rafters above, or the way its tiny black eyes tracked their every movement before it disappeared into the night. Because while Cale had been planning his revenge, other forces had been watching, waiting, and some secrets were too dangerous to let unfold unchecked. The game was about to begin, but not everyone knew they were players yet. Chapter 3. The Weight of Destiny. Aurelia's fingers trembled as she fastened the delicate silver locket around her neck, the only piece of jewelry she owned that had belonged to her father. The metal felt cold against her skin, like a promise she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. Outside her cottage window, the full moon hung heavy and pregnant with power, its light streaming through the glass to paint everything in shades of silver and shadow. In a few hours, she would walk to the sacred grove where the mating ritual would determine her fate. "You look beautiful," Elena said from the doorway, her voice thick with emotion. Aurelia caught her reflection in the old mirror propped against her dresser. The simple white dress she wore was traditional, pure and flowing, meant to represent new beginnings. On her, it felt like a costume for a play she didn't want to perform in. "I look terrified," she corrected, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her mother moved into the room, carrying something wrapped in soft cloth. "I have something for you. Something I should have given you years ago." Elena unwrapped the bundle to reveal an ancient book, its leather cover worn smooth by countless hands. Strange symbols were etched into the binding, and even looking at them made Aurelia's hybrid magic stir restlessly under her skin. "What is it?" she whispered. "Your grandmother's grimoire. Your father's mother." Elena's fingers traced the symbols with reverence. She was a powerful witch before she mated with a werewolf. This contains everything she learned about hybrid magic, including prophecies. Aurelia's heart skipped. Prophecies? One in particular. Elena opened the book to a page near the center, where elegant script flowed across the parchment in faded ink. Listen to this. "When moon's light reveals the hybrid's heart, two souls shall meet where shadows part. The cursed king and outcast maid, through bond of blood and magic made, shall heal the wounds of ancient hate and forge a new world's loving fate." The words seemed to shimmer on the page, and Aurelia felt something shift deep in her chest, like a door opening in her soul that she'd kept locked for years. You think this is about me?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I think the moon goddess has plans for you that go far beyond what anyone in this pack could imagine. A knock at the door interrupted them. Heavy, authoritative, the kind of knock that meant official pack business. Elena quickly closed the grimoire and tucked it into Aurelia's hands. Keep this safe. Study it when you can. Your magic is stronger than you know, my darling. Don't let anyone, make you feel ashamed of what you are. The knock came again, more insistent. Aurelia slipped the grimoire into the deep pocket of her dress, its weight settling against her hip like a secret. She moved to answer the door, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. Beta Marcus stood on her threshold, his weathered face carefully neutral. Behind him, 2 junior pack members waited with burning torches, their flames dancing in the night breeze. It's time, Marcus said simply. Aurelia nodded, her throat suddenly too tight for words. She kissed her mother's cheek, breathing in the familiar scent of herbs and love that had been her sanctuary for 27 years. No matter what happens tonight, Elena whispered, remember that you are worthy of love, real love, the kind that sees all of you and chooses to stay. Then Aurelia was walking into the night, flanked by torchbearers like some ancient sacrifice. The path to the sacred grove wound through the heart of Silverwood territory, and with each step, more pack members joined the procession. Their whispers followed her like autumn leaves rustling in the wind. The hybrid's finally having her moment. Poor thing. Another year of disappointment. Maybe this time she'll find someone desperate enough. Aurelia kept her chin high and her step steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird. The grimoire's weight against her hip reminded her of her grandmother's words, of prophecies and destinies larger than pack gossip. But as the sacred grove came into view, torchlight flickering between ancient oak trees, the entire pack gathered in expectant silence. Aurelia couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. The moon goddess kept her secrets well, after all. And tonight, under the light of the full moon, those secrets would finally begin to unfold. Chapter 4. The Mating Ritual. Following the torchlit path deeper into Silverwood's heart, Aurelia felt the weight of countless eyes tracking her every step. The sacred grove stretched before them like an ancient amphitheater, moonlight filtering through towering oaks that had witnessed centuries of mating bonds. What would it feel like to be wanted? Pack members formed a perfect circle, their faces painted silver by lunar glow. Unmated wolves stood in the center, some trembling with anticipation, others radiating confidence. Aurelia took her place among them, the grimoire's weight against her hip, a constant reminder of destinies yet unfulfilled. Alpha Marcus raised his arms, commanding silence. Under the moon goddess's eternal watch, we gather to witness the sacred bonds that shape our future. The crowd erupted in howls that made Aurelia's bones vibrate. Then, stillness. Waiting. One by one, wolves began to shift, their forms blurring, elongating, transforming into magnificent beasts whose eyes glowed amber in the darkness. The scents hit Aurelia like physical blows, musk and desire, territorial claims and primal need. Where is he? Her heart hammered against her ribs. Where is my... The scent struck her like lightning. Wild honey, pine forests. Something indefinably male that made her hybrid magic surge to life beneath her skin. Every nerve ending screamed recognition, even as her mind reeled in confusion. Mate! Mate! Across the circle, a magnificent wolf emerged from the shadows. Coal-black fur caught moonbeams like trapped starlight. Powerful muscles rippled beneath his coat as he moved with predatory grace toward her. His eyes, those devastating amber eyes, locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. But something was wrong. His scent carried undertones of wrongness, like flowers left too long in stagnant water, like promises about to be broken. Kyle shifted back to human form, his naked body drawing appreciative murmurs from unmated females. Handsome, strong, perfect, and looking at her like she was a disease he needed to cure. "Aurelia Moonwhisper," his voice carried across the grove, formal and cold. "The moon goddess has spoken." No. Her soul screamed the word even as her body betrayed her, stepping forward on trembling legs. "This can't be right. It can't." Cale Blackthorn of the Northern Territories." He paused, his gaze sweeping the watching crowd before returning to her with something that might have been pity. "Reject you as my mate." The words hit like physical blows. "Reject, reject, reject. Your blood runs tainted," he continued, each word a knife between her ribs. "Half-breed, abomination. The moon goddess made an error tonight, one I will not compound by accepting what should never have been offered." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shocked, some satisfied, all devastating. Aurelia's legs nearly buckled. 27 years of preparation, of building walls around her heart, and still, it felt like dying. The mate bond stretched between them like a severed rope, bleeding magic into the night air. Run! Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to disappear into the forest where she could bleed in private. Run! But her feet remained rooted to earth that suddenly felt like quicksand. Then, another scent. Winter storms. Ancient power. Something so utterly dominant it made every wolf in the grove submit without conscious thought. The crowd parted like water before a ship's prow, and Adrian Nightfall stepped into the light.
Chapter 5. The Alpha King's Claim. Even from the shadows where duty had forced him to observe, Adrian felt the exact moment Aurelia's heart shattered. The sound, though inaudible to lesser ears, cut through him like silver claws. Her pain hit his enhanced senses with nauseating intensity, because something deep in his chest, something he'd buried beneath years of calculated control, recognized her. Mine. The thought slammed into him with shocking clarity, not the mate bond, that remained frustratingly absent, but something older, deeper, a connection forged in childhood terror and never truly severed. The girl from the forest, the hybrid child I saved 20 years ago. Adrian's curse pulsed beneath his skin, responding to the emotional chaos surrounding them. Dark magic that had plagued his bloodline for generations stirred restlessly, feeding off supernatural energy like a parasite. She doesn't remember. The realization should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like another form of rejection. Your blood runs tainted. Cale's voice carried across the grove, each word precisely calculated for maximum damage. Half-breed. Abomination. Adrian's vision went red. Enough. Power rolled off him in waves as he stepped from the shadows, every wolf in his path dropping to their knees without conscious thought. Even the elders, ancient and proud, bowed their heads in submission. He was their Alpha King, their ultimate authority, and he would not allow this travesty to continue. Kyle Blackthorn. His voice cut through the night like a blade, commanding absolute silence. You dare speak of the moon goddess making errors? The younger wolf's face went pale, though he managed to keep his chin raised. My lord, I only meant... You meant to publicly humiliate a member of my pack. Adrian's gaze swept the crowd before returning to Cale with lethal intensity. To question the wisdom of forces beyond your comprehension. Liar. Adrian could smell the deception rolling off Blackthorn in waves, mixed with something else. Something artificially sweet that didn't belong in his natural scent. Dark magic. But proving magical interference would require time they didn't have. Not with Aurelia standing frozen in the center of the grove, her pain so tangible it made his curse writhe beneath his skin. Adrian moved until he stood directly before her, close enough to catch her scent. Wild flowers and rainstorms, with undertones of magic that called to his very soul. Aurelia Moonwhisper, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the grove. Will you accept my claim? Her head snapped up, green eyes wide with shock and something that might have been hope. Your claim? I, Adrian Nightfall, Alpha King of the Northern Alliance. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the stunned crowd. Claim you as my mate and queen. Gasps, shouts, chaos. The pack erupted around them, but Adrian's focus remained fixed on Aurelia's face. On the way her lips parted in surprise, on the tears that clung to her dark lashes like captured moonbeams. But you're not, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crowd's uproar. The mate bond. I don't feel, neither do I. The admission cost him, but she deserved honesty. This is not about mystical connections, Aurelia. This is about choice. Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception and finding only grim determination. Why? The single word held a lifetime of questions. Because I owe you a debt 20 years overdue. Because your pain calls to something broken in my soul. Because you deserve better than public humiliation. Because, he said simply, you are worth protecting. Before she could respond, before doubt could take root, Adrian claimed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, magic erupted between them like wildfire.
Chapter 6. A Silent Bond Power. That was Aurelia's first coherent thought as Adrian's fingers closed around hers. So much power it makes my hybrid magic sing. The touch should have been simple, skin against skin, nothing more. Instead, it felt like touching lightning, like being struck by destiny itself. Around them, the pack's chaos faded to distant noise. Elder Ravenclaw was shouting about tradition. Kale looked murderous. Unmated females wept with disappointment. None of it mattered. Because in Adrian's ice-blue eyes, Aurelia saw recognition. He knows. The thought hit her with startling clarity. He knows what I am, what I've always been, and he's choosing me anyway. Come. Adrian's voice remained steady despite the magical storm crackling between their joined hands. We have much to discuss. He led her through the parting crowd, his presence so commanding that even the most vocal objectors fell silent. Aurelia felt like she was floating, disconnected from her body and the earth beneath her feet. Adrian Nightfall chose me. The most powerful alpha in their world had publicly claimed her as his mate. This can't be real. But his hand anchoring hers felt real enough, as did the whispers that followed their retreat. Political move, has to be desperate for an heir. Hybrid magic, dangerous combination. Each comment scraped against her already raw nerves, but Adrian's grip tightened reassuringly, as if he heard every cruel word and refused to let them touch her. They walked in silence until the grove's torchlight faded behind them, leaving only moonlight to guide their path. The night air carried scents of pine and possibility, of futures yet unwritten. Where are we going? She finally asked. Somewhere we can speak freely. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her chest tight. Away from prying ears and political calculations. The abandoned watchtower stood sentinel on Silverwood's eastern border, its stone walls weathered by centuries of storms. Adrian led her up the spiral staircase to the top, where ancient battlements provided a panoramic view of their territory. Breathtaking. Forest stretched to the horizon, silver-touched and mysterious under the full moon's glow. In the distance, lights from the Pack village twinkled like fallen stars. It's beautiful, she whispered. Yes. But when she turned, Adrian wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. It is. Heat bloomed in her cheeks. He can't mean. Why did you do it? The question burst from her lips before courage could desert her. Public claiming. That's serious. Binding. You can't just... I don't do anything just, he interrupted, moving to lean against the stone parapet. Every choice has consequences. I accept them. But why me? The unspoken question hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she dared cross. Adrian seemed to read her thoughts anyway. "You think I chose randomly? Out of pity?" "Didn't you?" The words tasted bitter on her tongue. His laugh held no humor. "Aurelia, do you remember being 7 years old? A night when the forest burned and darkness came hunting?" Her breath caught. The memory surfaced like bubbles rising through deep water. Terror and smoke, hidden in an oak tree's embrace. Amber eyes that promised safety. "The boy in the shadows," she breathed. "That was you. You remember." How could I forget? Though she'd tried to convince herself it was a dream, the memory had shaped her dreams for 20 years. "You saved my life, and you've been alone ever since." His voice carried weight she didn't understand. Tonight I returned the favor." Favor. The word cut deeper than Kale's rejection had. "So this is charity?" "No." Adrian turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw something that made her heart stutter. "This is possibility." Before she could ask what he meant, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. The emotional trauma of rejection, the shock of Adrian's claim, the magical energy still crackling through her system. It all crashed over her at once. Sleep. She needed sleep and time to process everything that had changed in one impossible night. "I should go home," she murmured. "Tomorrow," Adrian said quietly. "Everything begins again. Are you ready?" No. She wasn't ready for any of this. Not for being a claimed mate, not for the political implications, not for the way her heart raced whenever he looked at her. But ready or not, her quiet life was over. "I have to be," she said.
Chapter 7. The First Confrontation. Following the chaos of the claiming ritual, Adrian led Aurelia through corridors that had witnessed centuries of pack politics and power plays. The Nightfall stronghold rose around them like a fortress of dark stone and ancient magic, its walls humming with protective wards that recognized his bloodline. She doesn't belong here. The thought struck him with unexpected force as he watched Aurelia's wide eyes take in tapestries depicting legendary battles and portraits of long-dead Alpha Kings. She belonged somewhere bright, somewhere safe. But safety was a luxury neither of them could afford. "This is overwhelming," she whispered, her voice echoing off marble floors that gleamed like black mirrors. Adrian pushed open the heavy oak doors to his private study, ushering her inside. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with texts on pack law, military strategy, and, hidden behind mundane covers, volumes on curse-breaking that had proven frustratingly useless. "Sit." The command came out harsher than he intended because her presence in his private space felt like completion, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Aurelia's chin lifted, a flash of defiance that sent heat shooting through his veins. "I'm not a dog to be ordered around." There, that spark of fire beneath her gentle exterior. That was what he remembered from the frightened child who'd hidden in an oak tree 20 years ago. Courage wrapped in vulnerability. "No," he agreed, settling behind his massive desk. "You're something far more dangerous." "Dangerous?" She laughed, but the sound held no humor. "I'm a half-breed apothecary who spends her days healing wounded animals. Hardly threatening." Liar. Adrian could see the power thrumming beneath her skin, calling to the darkness that lived in his own blood. "You underestimate yourself, Aurelia. That's going to change." Her green eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you want from me? Because this isn't real. We both know that." Real. The word hit like a physical blow because nothing in his life had felt real for years. Everything was duty, obligation, the endless weight of a crown that came with a blood curse he couldn't break. Real or not, it's binding. Adrian leaned forward, watching her pulse flutter at her throat. You are now my mate in the eyes of every pack in the Northern Alliance. That comes with expectations. Such as sharing my bed, such as bearing my air, such as standing beside me while I slowly die from the inside out. Public appearances, pack events, playing the role of Luna Queen when necessary. Each word felt like swallowing ground glass. In return, you'll have my protection and the resources of the royal pack. Aurelia stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked his private gardens. Moonlight painted her profile in silver, and Adrian's chest tightened with an emotion he couldn't name. Protection from what? She asked. From enemies who would use you against me. From the curse that's slowly killing me. From the darkness that whispers I should claim you completely and damn the consequences. From those who would see you harmed because of your connection to me. She turned, and in her eyes he saw the exact moment understanding dawned. You have enemies. I'm the Alpha King. I have nothing but enemies. Adrian's smile held no warmth. The question is whether you're prepared to face them. Are you prepared to watch me die? The question burned on his tongue, but he kept it locked away because some truths were too heavy to share. I need time, Aurelia said quietly, to think, to process all of this. Adrian nodded, though every instinct screamed at him to keep her close, safe, his. Tomorrow, we begin training, he said instead. If you're going to survive in my world, you'll need to be stronger than you've ever imagined. But as she turned to leave, her scent lingering in the air like a promise, Adrian wondered if he was the one who needed to be stronger. Because looking at her, remembering the child he'd saved and the woman she'd become, he realized his greatest enemy might not be external at all. It might be the growing certainty that he was falling for someone he could never truly have.
Chapter 8. A Silent Bond. Following a restless night filled with dreams of amber eyes and childhood terrors, Aurelia woke to find servants placing breakfast on the marble table in her guest chambers. The luxury felt suffocating. Silk curtains, golden fixtures, everything gleaming with wealth she'd never imagined. This isn't my world. The thought hit her as she picked at exotic fruits whose names she didn't know. I don't belong here. But the grimoire hidden beneath her pillow pulsed with warm energy, reminding her of destinies larger than her comfort zone. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Come in. Adrian entered, and the sight of him in the morning light stole her breath. Gone was the formal Alpha King from last night's confrontation. This version wore simple black clothes that hugged his powerful frame, his dark hair slightly mussed as if he'd run his fingers through it. Beautiful. The thought came unbidden, followed immediately by confusion. When did I start thinking of him as beautiful? Sleep well? His voice held a rough quality that made her skin tingle. Barely. She gestured to the opulent surroundings. This is all a bit much. Something flickered in his ice-blue eyes. Understanding, maybe even regret. I'll have simpler quarters prepared if you prefer. He's accommodating? The revelation surprised her because everything she'd heard about Adrian Nightfall suggested a man who bent the world to his will, not one who adjusted to others' needs. That's kind of you? I'm not kind, Aurelia. His smile held a sharp edge. I'm practical. Uncomfortable allies are unreliable allies. Allies, not mates, not partners. Allies. Before she could respond, the world tilted sideways. Forest, smoke, terror. Suddenly, she was 7 years old again, pressed against rough bark while death stalked the darkness. But this time the vision was clearer, details her young mind had been too frightened to retain. A boy moving like liquid shadow. Amber eyes filled with determination. The scent of winter storms and wild magic. Adrian, she gasped, the vision slamming her back to the present. He was at her side instantly, steady hands on her shoulders. What happened? You went pale as moonlight. The dreams. They weren't dreams at all, were they? They were memories, shared memories bleeding through whatever connection had formed between them 20 years ago. "I remember," she whispered. "Not just that you saved me. I remember feeling what you felt, your determination, your—" She struggled for words. "Your need to protect me." Adrian's hands tightened on her shoulders, and in his eyes she saw confirmation. "The bond." "What bond? You said yourself we're not true mates." "Not a mate bond." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Something else. Something that formed that night when magic and terror collided." Magic. Her hybrid power had been barely controlled at 7, raw and instinctive. His alpha dominance had been overwhelming even as a child, when they'd connected across that terrified moment. "We're linked," she breathed. "Somehow, we're actually linked." It would explain the shared dreams, the recognition. Adrian's thumb brushed across her cheek and she realized she was crying. "The way you call to something in my blood that has nothing to do with pack politics?" The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they dared cross. This changes everything. If they were truly connected, if that night had forged something deeper than memory, then his claiming wasn't just political protection. It was personal. "What does this mean?" she asked. "I don't know." For the first time since she'd met him, Adrian looked uncertain, vulnerable, human. "But I intend to find out." Before either could say more, a commotion erupted in the hallway outside. Shouting, running footsteps, the sound of someone demanding immediate audience with the Alpha King. Adrian's expression shifted from vulnerable to lethal in heartbeats. "Stay here." But as he moved toward the door, Aurelia caught his arm. Power crackled between them at the contact, not painful but intense enough to make them both gasp. "Whatever's happening," she said quietly, "we face it together." Together. The word felt like a promise neither of them was ready to make. But ready or not, the new reality of their bonded existence was about to be tested.
Chapter 9. A Serpent's Whisper. Moving swiftly through corridors now buzzing with urgent activity, Adrian felt the familiar weight of crisis settling on his shoulders. 20 years of rule had taught him to recognize the scent of trouble, and today it reeked of political manipulation. "My lord." Beta Marcus appeared at his elbow, face grim with barely controlled anger. "We have a situation." "Of course we do." Adrian's jaw clenched as they rounded the corner leading to the main hall. It was too much to hope for a peaceful morning. "Cale Blackthorn is here," Marcus continued. "With witnesses, he's demanding a formal audience to contest your claiming." Adrian's blood went cold. Pack law was clear. A claiming could be challenged within 24 hours if the challenger could prove coercion, deception, or violation of sacred bonds. It was an ancient protection designed to prevent forced matings. Clever. Someone had coached Cale well because this attack was perfectly timed and legally sound. "On what grounds?" "Interference with a true mate bond. He claims you used your alpha authority to steal his rightful mate." Rightful mate. The words tasted like poison in Adrian's mind because he'd smelled the artificial sweetness clinging to Cale last night. Evidence of magical manipulation that would be nearly impossible to prove. They entered the main hall where a crowd had already gathered. Pack members lined the walls, their faces showing everything from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. At the center stood Cale, flanked by 2 wolves Adrian didn't recognize. Witnesses, presumably to support his claim. "But where's—" Aurelia appeared at his side, having ignored his order to stay in her chambers. Her presence sent unwanted heat through his veins, followed immediately by concern because this confrontation could destroy her reputation permanently. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "Like hell." Her green eyes blazed with determination. "This is about me. I have the right to hear what he's saying." Stubborn. The trait should have annoyed him. Instead, it made him want to pull her against his chest and shield her from the ugliness about to unfold. Cale's gaze found Aurelia, and his expression shifted to something that might have been genuine regret. Performance, Adrian realized. He's performing for the crowd. Aurelia, Cale's voice carried across the hall, pitched to sound wounded and sincere. I'm here to free you from this arrangement. She stiffened beside Adrian. Free me? The Alpha King has interfered with sacred bonds. Cale's witnesses nodded solemnly, playing their parts perfectly. Last night, I felt the mate bond snap into place. You felt it too. I could see it in your eyes. Lies. But lies wrapped in enough truth to be believable. Adrian had smelled the bond's presence, brief and artificial as it was. But before I could complete the claiming ritual, Cale continued, Adrian Nightfall used his authority to override the moon goddess's will. He stole what was never his to take. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some approving, some outraged, all dangerous. This is about more than Aurelia. Adrian's political instincts screamed warnings. This is about undermining my authority, making me appear weak. Strong words, Blackthorn. Adrian's voice carried to every corner of the hall, cold with authority. Do you have proof of these accusations? One of Cale's witnesses stepped forward, an older wolf whose scent carried traces of unfamiliar territory. Outsider, probably from whatever pack had hired him. I observed the mate bond's formation, the wolf declared. The connection was genuine, sanctified by the moon goddess herself. Sanctified by dark magic, Adrian corrected silently, but proving magical interference would require time and resources they didn't have. Furthermore, the witness continued, pack law clearly states that Alpha Authority cannot supersede divine will in matters of mating bonds. More murmurs. Louder now, with undertones that made Adrian's curse pulse beneath his skin. If this continued, he'd face a formal challenge to his rule, exactly what his enemies wanted. But they made one mistake. Adrian's gaze found Aurelia, saw the fire building in her green eyes as she listened to lies being spoken about her life. They forgot that she has a voice too. Aurelia. He kept his tone neutral, careful not to appear coercive. The floor is yours. Tell them what you remember about last night. Choose, he thought. Choose whether to trust me or side with familiar rejection. Her answer would determine not just their fate, but the future of everything he'd built. And watching her straighten her shoulders like a queen preparing for battle, Adrian realized he was about to learn just how much courage lived beneath her gentle exterior.
Chapter 10. The test building on the tension that had erupted in the main hall, Aurelia stepped forward with newfound courage blazing in her chest. Every pair of eyes in the room tracked her movement, some hopeful, others predatory, all waiting to see which side she would choose. You want to know what I remember about last night? Her voice carried clearly across the vast space. I remember feeling the mate bond snap into place. Brief, artificial, wrong. Cale's face went pale. Aurelia, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Power thrummed beneath her skin as hybrid magic responded to her emotional state. I felt something that wasn't real, something that tasted like rotten flowers and broken promises. Dark magic. She couldn't prove it, but she'd tasted enough magical corruption in her healing work to recognize the signature. That's impossible, one of Cale's witnesses protested. A mate bond cannot be artificially created. Can't it? Aurelia's green eyes blazed as she turned to face the crowd. How convenient that you all seem to know so much about magical manipulation. Adrian's presence at her back felt like an anchor, steady, supportive, but not controlling. He was letting her fight this battle because he understood what she was only beginning to realize. This wasn't about him. This was about her right to choose her own destiny. Furthermore, she continued, even if the bond had been real, which it wasn't, Cale Blackthorn rejected me publicly before Adrian ever intervened. The hall erupted in murmurs. Pack law was clear. A rejection severed all mate claims permanently. Cale's jaw clenched. I was overcome by emotion. The shock of discovering my true mate was half-breed, Aurelia finished. You said so yourself, loudly, in front of everyone. Her smile held razor-sharp edges. You don't get to take that back because it's politically convenient. Victory. She could taste it in the sudden shift of the crowd's energy. But Cale wasn't finished. Then prove it, he snarled, his mask of civility finally slipping. Prove your bond with the Alpha King is genuine. Prove it. The challenge hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. How? Adrian's voice carried deadly calm. Combat trial. Cale's smile turned predatory. Ancient law permits it when a claiming is disputed. If your bond is true, it will strengthen you both in battle. No. Every protective instinct Aurelia possessed screamed against the idea. She'd seen what combat trials could do. Brutal, often fatal contests that settled disputes through violence. I accept, Adrian said quietly. I don't. Aurelia spun to face him, anger and terror warring in her chest. This is insane. You could be killed. And if I refuse? Adrian's ice-blue eyes held hers steadily. My authority will be questioned by every pack in the Alliance. My enemies will smell weakness. Politics. Always politics. But beneath his calm exterior, she caught something else. A flicker of pain that had nothing to do with pack dynamics. When? The question came from Beta Marcus, his weathered face grim. 3 days, Cale declared. At the Bloodstone Arena, traditional weapons only. 3 days, not nearly enough time to prepare, which was probably the point. As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the upcoming trial, Aurelia found herself swept along by servants and pack members offering congratulations on her brave stand. But all she could think about was Adrian's face when he'd accepted the challenge. He expects to lose. The realization hit her like ice water. He's fighting because he has to, not because he thinks he can win. Later that evening, alone in her chambers, Aurelia pulled out her grandmother's grimoire. The ancient book fell open to a page she'd never seen before. A ritual circle surrounded by text written in multiple languages. The bonding of souls, she read aloud. When mate bonds fail, true love may forge stronger chains. Her heart hammered as she absorbed the ritual's requirements. Dangerous, unprecedented. But if it worked, 3 days. She had 3 days to master magic she barely understood and save the man who'd risked everything to protect her. The test wasn't going to be Adrian's alone.
Chapter 11. The midpoint shift. Despite the confidence he'd projected during Cale's challenge, Adrian knew the truth that gnawed at his bones like hungry wolves. He was dying. The curse that had plagued his bloodline for 5 generations pulsed beneath his skin with increasing frequency, each episode stealing more of his strength. What his pack didn't know, what he'd hidden behind carefully constructed facades, was that he had perhaps weeks left before the dark magic consumed him entirely. Ironic. He'd finally found someone worth living for just as death came calling. You're brooding again. Aurelia's voice carried from the doorway of his private study, where moonlight painted everything silver and shadow. I don't brood. Adrian didn't look up from the military strategy texts spread across his desk. I plan. For a fight you don't think you can win. Perceptive. Too perceptive. What makes you say that? She moved into the room with fluid grace, and her scent, wildflowers and rainstorms, made his chest tight with longing. Because you accepted, without hesitation. Men who expect victory usually weigh their options. Smart woman. Another reason his heart was making foolish choices his mind couldn't afford. Kyle is younger, faster, unburdened by... Adrian gestured vaguely at himself. Political responsibilities. Is that what we're calling it? Aurelia settled into the chair across from his desk, green eyes seeing too much. Because I think there's something you're not telling me. Everything. He wasn't telling her everything because some burdens were too heavy to share. Such as, "Why you really claimed me." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And don't say protection. That's not the whole truth." Adrian set down his book, studying her face in the lamplight. Young, beautiful, brave enough to challenge him despite being terrified of her own power. Tell her. The urge was almost overwhelming. Tell her about the curse, about the prophecy your grandmother spoke before she died, about the way your chest feels less hollow when she's near. 20 years ago, he said instead, I made a promise to a frightened child that someday, when she needed protection, I would provide it. And that's all? No, that wasn't all, but the rest was too dangerous to admit. The growing certainty that she was more than just the girl he'd saved, the way her hybrid magic called to the darkness in his blood, the possibility that she might be the key to breaking a curse that had killed every male in his line before their 40th birthday. Hope, such a poisonous emotion. That's enough, he said quietly. Aurelia leaned forward and he caught the faint shimmer of magic beneath her skin, power responding to emotional intensity. What if I told you I've been having dreams, visions of us, together, fighting side by side with magic that shouldn't be possible? Adrian's blood went cold. What kind of magic? Combined magic, hybrid and alpha, fused into something. She struggled for words. Something that feels like sunlight after an endless winter. The prophecy. His grandmother's dying words echoed in his memory. When hybrid light meets cursed dark, two souls shall heal what gods could not. Aurelia. Her name came out rougher than intended. You need to stay away from the combat trial. Absolutely not. This isn't a request. Power leaked into his voice, the commanding tone that made entire packs submit. It's too dangerous. Her eyes blazed with defiant fire. You don't get to protect me by shutting me out, not when I might be able to help. Help. If she only knew how desperately he needed her help, how the curse whispered that her touch might be salvation or destruction. He couldn't tell which. The magic you're describing, Adrian chose his words carefully. It's theoretical at best, lethal at worst. More lethal than watching you die in an arena because you're too proud to accept assistance? Yes. Probably yes, because hybrid magic was unpredictable on the best days. But looking at her, seeing the determination etched in every line of her face, Adrian realized she was going to try to help him, whether he permitted it or not. Stubborn woman. The trait should have annoyed him. Instead, it made him want to kiss her until they both forgot about curses and combat trials, and the weight of crowns that came with blood prices. If you're determined to involve yourself, he said slowly, then we train together. No magic experiments without supervision. Deal. Her smile could have lit the darkest night. Now? What exactly is this curse you think I don't know about? Too perceptive by half. And suddenly, Adrian found himself telling her everything.
Chapter 12. The False Betrayal. Following Adrian's devastating confession about the curse slowly killing him, Aurelia spent the next day buried in ancient texts and magical theory. Her grandmother's grimoire had become her constant companion, its pages revealing secrets that made her head spin with possibility and terror. Soul-bonding rituals, power fusion techniques, magic that could heal or destroy. But now, as she sat in the castle's great hall surrounded by pack elders and visiting dignitaries, none of that knowledge mattered, because Adrian was making an announcement that felt like a knife between her ribs. The Northern Alliance requires stability above all else. His voice carried to every corner of the vast space, formal and cold as winter steel. Personal desires must yield to political necessity. No. Aurelia's hands clenched in her lap as dread pooled in her stomach like poison. Therefore, following ancient protocols established by the Treaty of Blood Moon, I am announcing my engagement to Lady Cassandra Silvermane of the Eastern Territories." The words hit like physical blows. Engagement, another woman, political marriage. Around her, the crowd erupted in polite applause and excited whispers. An advantageous match, a strengthening of alliances. Everything a good king should prioritize. Everything except the woman who'd been stupid enough to believe she mattered. Aurelia's vision blurred as Lady Cassandra, beautiful, pure-blooded, perfect, stepped forward to accept congratulations. The woman's silver hair caught the light like captured moonbeams, and her smile held the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Of course. Of course Adrian would choose someone like that over a half-breed apothecary with trust issues and uncontrollable magic. "The wedding will take place immediately following the combat trial," Adrian continued, and Aurelia caught the slight tightness around his eyes that suggested this wasn't entirely his choice. "Assuming, naturally, that I survive Cale Blackthorn's challenge. Assuming he survives, because even now, even while announcing his engagement to another woman, Adrian was planning for his own death. He lied. The realization burned through her chest like acid. Everything he said about caring, about protection, about the connection between us, all lies. Beta Marcus appeared at her elbow, his weathered face sympathetic. "My lady, perhaps you'd like to retire for the evening." Run. Every instinct screamed at her to flee before she made a fool of herself by crying in public. But as she started to rise, Adrian's gaze found hers across the crowded hall, and in his ice-blue eyes, she saw... pain? No. She couldn't afford to read meaning into expressions when actions spoke so much louder. "Lady Aurelia," Cassandra's musical voice cut through her thoughts. "I do hope we can be friends. Adrian speaks so highly of your healing abilities." Healing abilities. As if that was all she was. A useful pet with medical skills. "Of course," Aurelia managed, her voice steady despite the storm raging in her chest. "I'm sure you'll be very happy together." Lies. She hoped they'd be miserable. She hoped Cassandra turned out to be boring and vapid and completely wrong for him. Stop. She couldn't think like that because it hurt too much. "If you'll excuse me," Aurelia murmured, already moving toward the hall's exit. "I have preparations to make." But as she fled through corridors that had briefly felt like home, all Aurelia could think about was the way Adrian had looked when he'd told her about the curse, the vulnerability in his voice when he'd admitted needing her help. Performance. It had all been performance. A desperate man using whatever tools were available to ensure his pack's survival after his death. Fool. She'd been such a fool to believe she was anything more than a convenient solution to his problems. In her chambers, Aurelia pulled out the grimoire one last time. The soul-bonding ritual stared back at her from the ancient pages. Dangerous magic that could save his life if he'd been willing to trust her. But he made his choice. Politics over partnership. Duty over whatever they might have had. Fine. If Adrian Nightfall wanted to die for his kingdom, she wouldn't stand in his way. But as she closed the book with shaking fingers, Aurelia couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something crucial, some piece of the puzzle that would make this betrayal make sense. Because the man who'd confessed his curse with tears in his eyes wasn't the same one who'd announced his engagement with cold calculation. Unless... The thought struck her like lightning. Unless this is part of something larger, something he can't tell me about. Hope. Such a dangerous emotion. But as the moon rose outside her window, Aurelia found herself wondering if Adrian's betrayal might actually be the most desperate act of love she'd ever witnessed. Chapter 13. A Desperate Alliance. Through the haze of betrayal and confusion that had clouded her judgment for 2 sleepless days, Aurelia finally understood the truth about Adrian's engagement announcement. Because standing in the moonlit gardens at midnight, watching him practice sword forms with deadly precision despite his weakening condition, she could see what political theater looked like on a man who was slowly dying. "You're stalling," she called out, stepping from the shadows where she'd been observing. Adrian's blade froze mid-swing. Moonlight caught the sheen of sweat on his bare chest, highlighting the sharp definition of muscles that shouldn't have been trembling with exhaustion after such basic exercises. "Shouldn't you be elsewhere?" His voice carried forced lightness that didn't match the way his hand shook as he lowered the sword. "Planning wedding festivities, perhaps?" There. That bitter edge that confirmed her suspicions. "The engagement is fake." "Is it?" But he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Yes." Aurelia moved closer, close enough to catch his scent. Winter storms and something darker now, something that smelled like dying. Because a man planning his real wedding doesn't practice alone at midnight. He doesn't look like he's memorizing every star in case he never sees them again. Adrian's laugh held no humor. "You see too much." "I see enough." She reached for his hand, and the moment their skin touched, magic sparked between them. Hybrid power meeting cursed darkness in a dance that felt like home. The engagement is protection. For me. Because whatever you're planning for the combat trial, you don't expect to survive it. Silence, heavy with truths neither wanted to speak aloud. "Cassandra will be a good queen," he said finally. "Strong bloodline, political connections, everything the pack needs after you die heroically in combat, having secured their future." Aurelia's grip tightened. "That's your master plan? Death with honor?" "Honor is all I have left." His ice-blue eyes finally met hers, and she saw the truth carved into every line of his face. "The curse is accelerating. Even if I survive, Kale, I have weeks, maybe days." "No." The word screamed through her soul. "Absolutely not." "Then we stop it," she said simply. "We?" Adrian tried to pull away, but she held fast. "Aurelia, this isn't your—" "The hell it isn't!" Power flared around them, making nearby flowers bloom out of season. "You claimed me, remember? That makes your problems my problems. I won't watch you die trying to save me. And I won't watch you die because you're too stubborn to accept help." Her voice cracked with emotion. "We're connected, Adrian. Whatever happened that night 20 years ago, whatever's growing between us now, it's real, it's powerful, and it might be the only thing that can break your family's curse." Truth. She could see recognition dawning in his eyes, the same recognition she'd felt when studying the soul-bonding ritual. "The magic required." He shook his head. "It's untested. Dangerous." "More dangerous than letting you die?" Silence. Then Adrian was kissing her. Fierce, desperate, like a man who'd been drowning and finally found air. His hands tangled in her hair while magic exploded around them, hybrid light meeting cursed darkness in a fusion that made the earth beneath their feet sing. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "If we do this," he whispered against her forehead, "there's no going back. Soul bonding is permanent, irreversible." "Good." Her smile was fierce with determination. "Because I'm tired of running from destiny. Together. Whatever came next, they would face it together."
Chapter 14. The unexpected pregnancy. Despite his best efforts to maintain emotional distance while they prepared for the soul-bonding ritual, Adrian found himself drawn to Aurelia like a moth to flame. Her presence eased the curse's constant pain. Her touch sparked magic he'd thought lost forever, and her determination to save him kindled hope in places that had been dark for years. Dangerous. Hope was the most dangerous emotion because it made you careless. "The ritual requires perfect timing," she said, poring over the ancient grimoire spread across his study desk. "Full moon, midnight, and both participants must be open to the magical connection." Open. Such a simple word for something that terrified him. Opening meant vulnerability, trust, admitting that he needed her more than political alliance or duty demanded. Aurelia. Her name came out rougher than intended. "If this fails, it won't." Her green eyes blazed with certainty. Because we were meant for this. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Adrian. She just takes her time revealing her plans. Meant for this. The words should have sounded like fantasy. Instead, they resonated in his chest like truth finally spoken aloud. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts. Beta Marcus entered without waiting for permission, his weathered face tight with concern. "My lord, we have a situation." "Of course we do." Adrian straightened, automatically shifting into alpha mode. "What kind of situation?" "Dr. Winters is here. She says it's urgent." The pack's physician entered behind Marcus, her usually calm demeanor showing cracks of excitement, concern. Adrian couldn't tell. "Lady Aurelia," Dr. Winters said without preamble, "I need to speak with you privately. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Adrian." Aurelia's chin lifted with stubborn determination that made his chest tight with affection. "Very well." The doctor's smile was cautious. "Congratulations, you're pregnant." Pregnant. The word hit Adrian like a physical blow, stealing breath and thought and everything except the ringing silence that followed impossible revelations. "That's..." Aurelia's voice was barely a whisper. "That's not possible. The tests are conclusive, approximately 6 weeks along." Dr. Winters's professional tone couldn't hide her amazement. "I've never seen anything like it. Hybrid pregnancies are extremely rare, but the magical signatures are extraordinary." 6 weeks? Adrian's mind raced backward, calculating dates and possibilities. The night he'd claimed her. The power surge when their hands touched. The way magic had been building between them ever since. Impossible. Except apparently not. How? Aurelia's question echoed his thoughts. "The soul bond," Dr. Winters said softly. "Even incomplete, the connection you two share has been fertile. The magical resonance created conditions for conception that shouldn't exist. Life. They'd created life together through nothing more than touch and shared power, and the growing certainty that they belonged to each other. The pregnancy will accelerate the bonding process," the doctor continued. "But it also means the ritual becomes more dangerous. You'll be channeling magic for 3 now, not 2. 3. Adrian's chest felt hollow and full simultaneously. A child. His child. Their child. A child who will never know their father. Because the curse wouldn't care about happy endings or new life, it would still kill him. How before. Long? His voice came out steady despite the storm raging in his chest. "Normal gestation for hybrid pregnancies is approximately 7 months, but given the magical intensity..." Dr. Winters hesitated. "Perhaps 5, maybe less. 5 months. If he survived the combat trial, if they successfully completed the soul bonding ritual, if the curse didn't claim him first, he might have 5 months to be a father. Not enough. It would never be enough." "Adrian?" Aurelia's hand found his, and power sparked between them, stronger now, somehow. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I want to live." For the first time in years, he desperately wanted to survive, not for duty or honor or political necessity, but for the chance to hold his child, to build a life with the woman who'd somehow become the center of his world. "I'm thinking," he said carefully, "that we have even more reason to make the ritual work." Everything changes. Again. But this time the change felt like possibility instead of obligation. This time, it felt like hope.
Chapter 15. The False Betrayal. Against all odds, and despite the pregnancy that now made everything infinitely more complicated, Aurelia had never felt more certain of anything in her life. The soul bonding ritual was their answer. To the curse, to the false political engagement, to the question of whether love could triumph over destiny's cruelest jokes, until Adrian destroyed everything with a single announcement. "The ritual is too dangerous," he declared during what was supposed to be their final planning session. I won't risk your life or our child's for something that might not even work. Might not work. After days of preparation, of studying magical theory until her eyes burned, of feeling their connection grow stronger with each passing hour, he was giving up. It will work, she insisted. The magical resonance between us is unpredictable at best. His ice-blue eyes had gone cold, distant. The warm lover who'd held her through nightmares was gone, replaced by the Alpha King who made calculated decisions about acceptable losses. I've made arrangements with the Eastern Pack. After the combat trial, regardless of outcome, you'll be escorted to their territory where you'll be safe. Safe. The word tasted like ashes. You're sending me away. I'm protecting our child. Each word fell like stones into still water. The engagement to Cassandra will proceed as planned. She's agreed to adopt the baby after you die heroically in combat? Aurelia's voice cracked with betrayal so deep it felt like drowning. You've already decided you're going to lose, haven't you? Silence. Damning, complete silence. This isn't about protection, she whispered, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. This is about control. You'd rather die on your terms than live on mine. Aurelia. No. Power flared around her, making books flutter and candles flicker. You don't get to make this choice for me, for us. I'm the Alpha King. Making impossible choices is what I do. Alpha King. Not her mate, not her lover, not the father of her child. Just a title and the weight of duty he wore like armor against anything that might make him vulnerable. Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss. The words came out steady despite the way her heart was shattering. Goodbye, Adrian. She was at the door when his voice stopped her. Aurelia, A pause, a breath. Then nothing. I love you. He'd been about to say it, she was certain. But love was apparently another luxury he couldn't afford. Fine. If Adrian Nightfall wanted to die for his crown, she wouldn't stand in his way. But she also wouldn't wait around to watch it happen. That night, alone in chambers that felt like a tomb, Aurelia made her own impossible choice. The ritual could work with one participant. The grimoire was clear about that. Dangerous, potentially fatal, but possible. If she channeled enough power during the combat trial, if she poured her life force into breaking the curse whether he wanted her to or not, he'll live. Their child would have a father, even if that father never forgave her for the sacrifice. Some things are worth dying for. Adrian had taught her that much, even if he was too blind to see that their love was one of them. Outside her window, the full moon rose like a silver eye watching over wolves who were too stubborn to accept salvation when it was offered freely. Tomorrow night, at the combat trial, while Adrian fought for honor and duty and all the cold things that kept him safe from feeling too much, she would fight for love. And if love demanded everything she had to give, so be it. Some battles were worth any price. Chapter 16, The Lone Wolf. Abandoning the suffocating luxury of Nightfall territory, Aurelia fled to the only sanctuary that had ever truly belonged to her. The modest apothecary where wounded creatures found healing and broken hearts could bleed in private. The familiar scent of dried herbs couldn't mask the metallic tang of despair that clung to her skin. 3 days. 3 days since Adrian had chosen duty over love, politics over their unborn child's future. Fool. She'd been such a monumental fool to believe their connection meant something beyond convenience. Her hands trembled as she ground valerian root with unnecessary violence. The repetitive motion should have brought comfort. It always had before. But comfort felt foreign now, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Mama's hurting, isn't she? The whispered words escaped before she could stop them. One palm pressed against the slight curve of her belly, where new life grew in defiance of its father's abandonment. Protection. That's what he'd called it. Sending her away like damaged goods while he marched toward certain death with his precious honor intact. The shop door's silver bell chimed softly. Aurelia didn't look up from her mortar and pestle because visitors meant questions she couldn't answer without breaking completely. "We're closed," she called out, her voice hoarse from crying. "Even for old friends?" Elena. Her mother's gentle tone nearly shattered what remained of Aurelia's composure. But tears were a luxury she couldn't afford, not when every drop felt like admitting defeat. Especially for old friends. Aurelia's grinding became more violent. They asked too many uncomfortable questions. Soft footsteps approached. Warm hands covered hers, stilling the frantic motion that had turned valerian into powder. "Tell me," Elena said simply. "Everything. The pregnancy, the curse, the soul-bonding ritual that could save him if he'd let her try. The engagement announcement that had felt like a blade between her ribs. He doesn't want to be saved," Aurelia whispered. "He'd rather die a martyr than live with me." "And you believe that?" "Yes." "No?" "Maybe." Confusion swirled through her chest like smoke, obscuring truth until she couldn't tell love from manipulation anymore. "Does it matter what I believe?" The question tasted bitter. He made his choice. Elena's fingers traced the tear tracks Aurelia thought she'd hidden. Did he? Or did he make the choice he thought would keep you safe? Safe. Everyone was so concerned with keeping her safe that they'd forgotten to ask what she actually wanted. "I want him alive," she admitted. "I want our child to know their father. I want—" Her voice cracked. "I want things that apparently don't matter to anyone but me." "They matter to him too," Elena said quietly. "More than you know." Lies. Kind lies meant to ease the sting of rejection, but lies nonetheless. Then why? Because love makes cowards of us all sometimes, even alpha kings. Coward. The word should have brought anger. Instead, it brought understanding that hurt worse than fury ever could. Outside, thunder rumbled across clear skies. Storm magic, wild and uncontrolled. Her hybrid power responding to emotional chaos without conscious direction. "The combat trial is tomorrow night," Aurelia said, watching lightning dance between her fingers. "He'll die because he's too proud to let me help." Will he? Elena's smile held secrets. Or will he discover that some battles can't be won alone? Hope. Such a treacherous emotion. But as Aurelia touched her belly where their child grew strong despite its father's doubts, she wondered if love might be worth one last desperate gamble
Chapter
after all.
17. A desperate plea. Contrary to Aurelia's assumptions about his motivations, Adrian spent the dawn hours before his combat trial doing something no Alpha King should ever have to do: begging. The ancient temple, hidden deep in Nightfall territory, had witnessed centuries of desperate prayers, but few as desperate as the one Adrian offered to gods who'd been silent since his bloodline's curse began. 5 generations, he whispered to marble statues whose eyes seemed to track his movements. 5 generations of your faithful servants dying before their time because of choices made by ancestors I never knew. Silence. Always silence. Moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting his skin in colors of prophecy and damnation. In a few hours he would face Kael Blackthorn in combat that would determine not just his fate, but the future of everyone he'd sworn to protect. Everyone except the one person who mattered most. I don't ask for victory, he continued, his voice echoing off stone walls that had heard similar pleas from his father, his grandfather, all the doomed men who'd worn his crown before him. I ask for time. Enough time to see my child born, to tell Aurelia. What? That he loved her? That sending her away had felt like carving out his own heart? That every breath without her presence was a reminder of what cowardice looked like? Footsteps echoed from the temple entrance. Adrian didn't turn because he recognized the measured gait that belonged to only one person brave enough to interrupt an alpha's prayers. Marcus. He kept his gaze fixed on the altar where candles flickered like dying hopes. Come to wish me luck? Come to tell you the truth. His beta's voice carried weight that made Adrian finally turn. About Lady Aurelia, about what she's planning. Planning. The word sent ice through his veins. What are you talking about? She's not going to the Eastern Territories tomorrow. She's going to attempt the soul-bonding ritual. Alone. No. The denial exploded from his chest with enough force to make candle flames dance. That's impossible. The ritual requires 2 participants under normal circumstances. Marcus finished. But the grimoire mentions exceptions, desperate measures for desperate times. Desperate measures, like channeling enough magical energy to kill herself in the process of breaking a curse that had already claimed 5 lives. She'll die, Adrian breathed. Probably. Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral. Unless someone stops her. Someone, meaning him. Meaning a choice between duty and the woman who'd become his entire world without him realizing when it happened. The combat trial can be postponed. Kale won't refuse a delay if you claim illness. Illness. Not entirely untrue considering the curse was eating him alive from the inside. But postponement would show weakness to the pack, raise questions about his fitness to rule. Politics. Always politics, even when love was bleeding out on altar stones. She's pregnant, Adrian said quietly. With my child. If she dies attempting this ritual, then you'll have lost everything that ever mattered. Marcus stepped closer, his weathered face showing rare emotion. The crown will survive, my lord. The pack will endure. But if you let her sacrifice herself for your pride... Pride. Was that what this was? Pride disguised as protection, ego wrapped in nobility. Maybe. Maybe he'd been so afraid of losing her that he'd driven her away himself, ensuring the very outcome he'd tried to prevent. Where is she? The old temple ruins, where her grandmother used to practice magic before the pack laws changed. Of course. Full circle. Back to the place where hybrid witches had once been welcomed instead of tolerated. Adrian was moving before conscious thought caught up with intention, running through corridors that suddenly felt like prison walls, bursting into the night air that tasted of storm magic and approaching doom. Hold on, he thought desperately. Hold on, my brave, stubborn, impossible woman, I'm coming. Because some battles were worth any price, even an Alpha King's pride.
Chapter 18. In the moonlit clearing where her grandmother had once taught young witches to harness nature's power, Aurelia knelt within a circle of ancient stones that hummed with residual magic. The soul-bonding ritual spread before her like a map to salvation or suicide. She couldn't tell which. But uncertainty was a luxury she couldn't afford when Adrian's life hung in the balance. Tonight. While he fought Kale in an arena designed for death, she would attempt magic that had never been tried by a single practitioner. Dangerous. Everything worthwhile was dangerous. The grimoire lay open beside her, its pages glowing with eldritch light that made the text writhe like living things. Ancient words in languages that predated pack law, predated civilization itself. To bind souls across distance, the caster must sacrifice what they value most. Life force. The translation was clear enough. She would pour her essence into breaking Adrian's curse, knowing that success might cost her everything. Worth it. Their child deserved a living father more than a dead mother who'd been too cowardly to try. Power built beneath her skin as she began the incantation, words flowing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Magic responded eagerly, too eagerly, like a starving creature finally offered sustenance. Control. She needed perfect control because one mistake would kill them both. Lightning crackled between her fingers, not the chaotic storm magic of emotional upheaval, but focused energy that tasted of starlight and ancient promises. The stone circle amplified her power, drawing strength from earth that had witnessed countless rituals. But something was wrong. Resistance. Like trying to push through invisible walls that grew thicker with each word of the spell. Fighting me already? she whispered to the night air. Even when I'm trying to save you? Stubborn man. Even unconsciously, Adrian was trying to protect her by blocking the magical connection that could heal him. Aurelia pressed harder, pouring more energy into the spell despite the way it made her vision blur. Their child's life depended on this working, their future. Pain. Sudden, overwhelming pain that felt like being torn apart from the inside. Too much. She was channeling too much power too quickly, burning through her life force like kindling in a wildfire. But it's working. She could feel the curse responding, ancient darkness recoiling from hybrid light that refused to be denied. Just a little more, she gasped, blood trickling from her nose as magical feedback ravaged her system. Almost enough! Adrian's voice thundered across the clearing, carrying alpha authority that made every supernatural creature for miles submit without question. Too late. The ritual was too far advanced to stop safely now. Interruption would either kill her instantly or leave them both magically crippled. "Don't you dare!" she began. But Adrian was already moving, crossing the circle's boundary with reckless disregard for the magical energies crackling around them like caged lightning. The moment he touched her, power exploded. White light, unbearable heat. The sensation of being unmade and reformed in the space between heartbeats. When awareness returned, Aurelia found herself cradled against Adrian's chest, both of them breathing hard while magic settled into new patterns beneath their skin. Alive. They were both alive, bonded. She could feel him now, not just his presence, but his emotions, his thoughts, the way love and terror warred in his chest like opposing armies. "You impossible, beautiful, reckless woman," he whispered against her hair. "Did you really think I'd let you do this alone?" Together. They'd completed the ritual together, sharing the magical load until it became manageable instead of lethal. "The curse?" she asked weakly. Adrian's smile was pure sunlight. "Gone. I can feel it. The darkness that's plagued my family for generations. It's gone." Victory. But as sirens wailed in the distance and torchlight appeared through the trees, Aurelia realized their troubles were far from over. Because breaking curses was one thing. Surviving the political consequences was another entirely. Chapter 19. The rebirth awakening from the soul-bonding ritual's aftermath, Aurelia discovered that salvation came with unexpected consequences. The magical fusion had left her transformed in ways that defied every supernatural law she'd studied. Her hybrid nature amplified beyond recognition, power thrumming beneath her skin like captured lightning waiting for release. "How do you feel?" Adrian's voice carried new harmonics that resonated directly in her bones. Different. Everything felt different. The world blazed with colors that hadn't existed moments before. Scents carried stories written in molecules. Even the air itself hummed with energies she could now taste and touch. "Like I've been sleeping my entire life and just woke up," she whispered, flexing fingers that sparkled with residual magic. The torchlight approaching through the forest drew closer, accompanied by voices that spoke of authority and consequences. Pack enforcers, council members, people who would demand explanations for magic that shouldn't have been possible. Politics. Even now, even after breaking a 5-generation curse through sheer determination and love, politics threatened to destroy everything they'd sacrificed to build. "We need to leave," Adrian said, though his tone suggested he was thinking several moves ahead. "Where can we go?" Aurelia struggled to her feet, amazed at how strength flowed through muscles that should have been exhausted from magical exertion. "Your pack will survive without me if necessary." His smile held grim determination. "But first, we finish what we started." Finish? The curse was broken. Their bond was complete. What else could... Understanding crashed over her like ice water. Kyle, the conspiracy, they're still out there. And now they know we're stronger than they anticipated. Adrian's eyes blazed with renewed purpose. "Time to take the offensive." hunt the hunters. The prospect should have terrified her. Instead, it awakened something primal and fierce in her chest, protective instincts magnified by the soul bond until they felt like divine mandate. The grimoire mentioned something about unified power, she said, remembering passages that had seemed theoretical until now. Abilities that only manifest when true mates bond completely. Such as? Aurelia closed her eyes, reaching into the new magical pathways that connected her consciousness to his. Information flowed between them like shared breath, his tactical knowledge blending with her intuitive understanding of magical theory. Incredible. They weren't just bonded, they were integrated at levels that transcended physical existence. We can track magical signatures across vast distances, she breathed. Sense deception. Share strength instantaneously. Her gaze met his, wonder and determination warring in her chest. We're not just mates anymore, Adrian. We're something new. Something powerful enough to change their world. The voices in the forest grew louder, more urgent. But instead of fear, Aurelia felt anticipation building like storm pressure before lightning strikes. Let them come. She was done hiding, done apologizing for power that others found inconvenient. Ready? Adrian extended his hand, and when their fingers intertwined, magic sang through the connection like a perfectly tuned instrument. Ready? For whatever came next, they would face it as equals, as partners, as forces of nature that refused to be contained by others' expectations. The transformation was complete. Now came the reckoning.
Chapter 20. The Final Stand. Emerging from the ancient temple ruins hand in hand with Aurelia, Adrian felt the weight of kingship settle differently on his shoulders, not as burden but as purpose finally aligned with personal truth. The pack enforcers who awaited them in the clearing carried torches that cast dancing shadows across faces etched with confusion and fear. Beta Marcus stood at their head, his weathered features carefully neutral despite the chaos swirling around unauthorized magic and abandoned combat trials. My lord, Marcus's voice cut through the night air with military precision. The council demands immediate explanations for, the council can wait. Adrian's tone carried alpha authority amplified by new magical resonance that made every wolf present step back involuntarily. We have more pressing concerns. Kyle. The conspiracy that had orchestrated this entire crisis still threatened everything they'd built together. Where is Blackthorn? The question emerged with deadly calm that promised consequences for lies or evasion. Gone. Marcus's jaw tightened. Disappeared when the combat trial was abandoned, his supporters scattered like smoke. Coward, but a dangerous one who would regroup and strike again when they least expected it. Track him, Adrian commanded, then paused as magical intuition whispered warnings that raised the hair on his neck. Actually, no. Too easy. Kyle's disappearance felt orchestrated like bait designed to lead them into another trap. We go to him, Aurelia said quietly, her voice carrying certainty that resonated through their bond. I can sense the dark magic that's been influencing him. It's old, older than pack politics. Ancient magic, the kind that required bloodlines and generational sacrifice to maintain, like curses that plagued alpha families for centuries. You think this conspiracy predates my claiming of you? Adrian asked, though magical intuition was already providing answers. I think your curse and my rejection were connected from the beginning. Her green eyes blazed with understanding that made his chest tight with admiration. Someone's been orchestrating supernatural events for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike. Decades, which meant enemies with patience and resources that dwarfed anything they'd previously imagined. The witch, Adrian realized aloud. The one working with Kale. She's not just some hired muscle. She's the source. Aurelia's grip on his hand tightened as power flowed between them, sharing insights that neither could have reached alone. The darkness that cursed your family, the magic that made Kale reject me, it all traces back to one person. One enemy. Finally, a target worthy of their combined fury. Then we end this tonight, Adrian declared, feeling certainty settle in his bones like destiny finally acknowledged. Together, together. No more secrets. No more protection through separation. They were bonded now, truly, completely, irrevocably, and that made them stronger than any threat their enemies could devise. "My lord," Marcus interrupted carefully, "the pack will understand when we return with Cale's head and the truth about who's been manipulating us all." Adrian's smile carried predatory satisfaction that made nearby wolves shiver with instinctive recognition. Or they won't, and will forge something new. Something better. A world where hybrid magic was celebrated instead of feared. Where power served love instead of politics. The night air carried sense of approaching storm and distant magic that tasted of endings and beginnings intertwined. In the distance, lightning flickered without thunder. Magical energy building toward confrontation that would reshape everything. Ready or not, Adrian thought as he and Aurelia stepped into darkness that no longer held any terror for either of them. Here we come.
Chapter 21. The hunt begins. Moving through moonlit forests with supernatural grace born of their magical fusion, Aurelia marveled at how completely the soul bonding had transformed not just her abilities, but her entire perception of what was possible. Power. It flowed between her and Adrian like shared breath, each lending strength to the other, until individual limitations became meaningless concepts. "Northwest," she murmured, following magical traces that glowed like breadcrumbs in her enhanced vision. "The dark magic is strongest there. Ancient, older than pack territories, older than the treaties that had shaped supernatural politics for generations. This conspiracy had roots that stretched back into legendary times when witches and wolves warred openly. How far?" Adrian's question carried tactical implications that her mind processed with borrowed military expertise. "Miles, but—" She hesitated, parsing sensations that defied easy explanation. Something's wrong with the trail. Too obvious, like following a path deliberately left for them to find. Trap? Probably. The certainty settled in her chest with grim satisfaction. But does it matter? No, not anymore. Whatever waited ahead, they would face it together with power that their enemies couldn't have anticipated. The forest around them hummed with nocturnal life, creatures that recognized predators in their midst and gave them wide berth. Even the trees seemed to lean away from their passage, as if magical energy made them uncomfortable reminders of older, wilder times. "Tell me about the vision," Adrian said, as they navigated terrain that would have challenged them separately but felt effortless now. Vision. The glimpse of possible futures that had flashed through her consciousness during the bonding ritual. Images of herself standing before crowds that hung on her every word, of Adrian at her side as they shaped policy that protected outcasts and hybrids. Leadership, she admitted. Not just survival, but actually changing things. Making the world better for people like us. Dangerous ambition. The best kind. Her smile held edges sharp enough to cut through pretense. "I'm tired of hiding what I am. Tired of apologizing for power that threatens comfortable people." Truth. For 27 years, she'd made herself smaller to fit into spaces designed for pure-blooded wolves. No more. "The pack won't accept change easily," Adrian warned, though his tone suggested he welcomed the challenge. "Then we'll find new packs, build alliances with other outcasts." Magic sparked between her fingers as possibilities crystallized into plans. Hybrids, lone wolves, anyone tired of being told they don't belong. Revolution. Not the violent kind that destroyed everything, but the quiet transformation that made old systems irrelevant through sheer force of better alternatives. "You're talking about reshaping supernatural society." "I'm talking about giving people choices." She caught his gaze, letting him see the determination that burned in her chest like captured starlight. "Starting with ourselves. Freedom, to love who they chose, to use their power without apology, to build something worth leaving their children. The magical trail ahead suddenly intensified, carrying scents of smoke and blood that made every protective instinct they possessed flare to life. Close. Whatever awaited them was very close now. "Ready?" Adrian asked, though the bond between them already carried his answer. Ready. For battle. For truth. For whatever came after they burned down the conspiracy that had tried to destroy their love before it could bloom. The hunt was ending. Time for the kill.
Chapter 22. The Climax. Converging on the abandoned cathedral where dark magic writhed through broken stained glass, Aurelia and Adrian moved as one entity split into two forms. Their soul bond hummed with shared purpose while ancient stones whispered warnings of sacrifices made in shadows. Here. The conspiracy's heart pulsed beneath Gothic arches where unholy ceremonies had twisted faith into weapon. Kyle stood at the altar, but he was no longer the man who'd rejected her. Purple veins traced his skin like infection, dark magic consuming him from within. "Welcome." The witch emerged from behind crumbling pillars, her form flickering between woman and nightmare. "Though you're decades too late to prevent anything meaningful." Decades. Adrian's tactical mind cataloged exits while rage built in his chest. "You orchestrated everything. The curse on my bloodline, Aurelia's isolation, our family's destruction." Families. Laughter echoed off stone that had absorbed centuries of prayers and screams. "Child, I am your family." Impossible. But magical truth sang through their bond, recognition that bypassed conscious thought and struck directly at inherited memory. "Great-grandmother Morgana," Aurelia breathed, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "The stories said you died in the purges. Death was exaggerated." The witch's smile revealed teeth filed to points. "Exile taught me patience. Revenge requires proper seasoning." 5 generations. She'd waited 5 generations for this moment, cursing Adrian's line while isolating Aurelia's, ensuring they would find each other only when their combined power could fuel her ultimate spell. "What do you want?" Adrian stepped forward, power crackling around him like contained lightning. "Immortality." Her gesture encompassed the cathedral's profane symbols. "Your soul bond creates energy that transcends death itself. I'll harvest it, along with your unborn child's potential." The baby. Protective fury exploded through both their minds as magic flared beyond conscious control. "You'll have to kill us first," Aurelia snarled, hybrid power manifesting as ethereal flames that danced across her skin. "Oh, my dear child." Morgana's expression held mockery. "That was always the plan." Kyle attacked without warning, no longer driven by political ambition but by magical compulsion that had stripped away everything human. His claws raked toward Adrian's throat while shadows erupted from every corner. "Move." Their bond synchronized reflexes until they fought like storm fronts colliding, Adrian's tactical precision merging with Aurelia's elemental fury to create devastation that made ancient stones scream. But Morgana had prepared for this moment across decades. Dark magic lashed at them from all directions while the cathedral itself became her weapon. Gargoyles animated with malevolent purpose, shadows given form and too much. Even united, they couldn't match power accumulated across lifetimes. "Surrender," Morgana commanded as binding spells wrapped around them like serpents. "Your deaths will birth something magnificent." Never. Desperation sparked innovation as Aurelia reached deeper into her grandmother's grimoire. Not the pages she'd memorized, but the blank spaces where invisible ink revealed final secrets. The counter-ritual, a spell designed to reverse generational curses by sacrificing the caster's accumulated power. "Adrian," she whispered through their bond. "Trust me. Always." His faith flowed through their connection as she began words that tasted of starlight and endings. Magic erupted, not dark or light, but something beyond both. Morgana's scream shattered windows as centuries of stolen power unraveled, her immortality dissolving like morning frost. In the sudden silence, only love remained.
Chapter 23. Falling Action, Unity Forged. Standing amid the cathedral's ruins where malevolent magic had finally met its match, Aurelia felt exhaustion warring with triumph as dawn light crept through shattered stone. The counter-ritual had worked. Morgana's conspiracy lay in ashes. Kale unconscious but freed from dark influence. Alive. They were all somehow alive, though magical feedback had drained her until standing required conscious effort. Is it over? Adrian's voice carried wonder that matched her own amazement at survival. The immediate threat, yes. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. But the consequences, those are just beginning. Political upheaval. News of Morgana's manipulation would shatter pack hierarchies built on lies. Leaders who'd gained power through cursed bloodlines would face challenges. Ancient treaties would require renegotiation. Good, Adrian said firmly. Change was overdue anyway. Progress. Not the violent revolution she'd feared, but transformation born of truth finally revealed. Footsteps echoed through the cathedral as Beta Marcus arrived with pack enforcers, their faces showing mixture of relief and apprehension at finding their leaders battered but victorious. The council is concerned, Marcus reported carefully. About unauthorized magic, about pack law being superseded by personal bonds. Of course they are. Tradition hated progress, especially when it threatened comfortable power structures. Then perhaps it's time for new councils, Aurelia suggested, surprising herself with the boldness in her voice. Ones that represent all supernatural creatures, not just pure-blooded wolves. Revolutionary thinking. But looking at Adrian's approving expression, she knew he shared her vision of inclusive governance. The other packs won't accept change easily, Marcus warned. They will when they see the benefits. Adrian's smile held confidence that made her chest warm with shared purpose. Hybrid magic just saved us all. Hard to argue against results. Practical politics. Use their victory as leverage for broader reform. Smart strategy that served both justice and pragmatism. What about Kyle? She gestured toward their unconscious former enemy. Exile, Adrian decided after brief consideration. He was manipulated, not evil. Chance for redemption in neutral territory. Mercy. Another sign of the man she'd fallen in love with. Strong enough to show compassion even toward those who'd threatened everything he valued. Outside pack members gathered in anxious clusters, their faces showing uncertainty about leadership that operated outside traditional parameters. But uncertainty could become acceptance given time and proof. Ready to reshape the world? Adrian asked, extending his hand with a smile that promised adventures yet to come. Ready. For challenges and changes. For building something better than what they'd inherited. Their fingers intertwined as they stepped into sunlight that felt like benediction on a new beginning.
Chapter 24. Walking through Silverwood territory as the sun climbed higher, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility, Adrian marveled at how completely his world had transformed in mere weeks. Freedom. Not just from the curse that had haunted his bloodline, but from expectations that had shaped his choices since childhood. He was still Alpha King, but now that title served love instead of constraining it. The pregnancy is progressing beautifully, Dr. Winters reported during their morning checkup, her professional excitement obvious. Enhanced by the soul bond, but stable. Extraordinary magical signatures. Extraordinary, like everything else about their new reality. How long until, Aurelia began. 3 months, perhaps less. The doctor's smile held genuine wonder. This child will be unprecedented. Alpha King bloodline merged with hybrid magic through true soul bonding. The implications? Staggering. Their offspring would possess capabilities that transcended current supernatural understanding. Not burden, but gift, if they raised the child with wisdom. Later, in the council chambers that had witnessed centuries of traditional pack politics, Adrian addressed assembled leaders with Aurelia at his side as equal partner, rather than decorative mate. The hybrid integration accords, he announced, presenting documents that would revolutionize supernatural society. Full citizenship for mixed-blood individuals, representation in governing councils, legal protection for unconventional magical practices, resistance, expected from traditionalists who'd built careers on exclusion. This goes against everything, Elder Ravenclaw protested. Everything that nearly destroyed us, Aurelia interrupted smoothly. Segregation created vulnerabilities that enemies exploited for generations. Integration makes us stronger. United front. Her political instincts had sharpened remarkably since accepting her power. The Northern Alliance will lead by example, Adrian continued. Other territories can follow or explain to their people why they choose continued conflict over cooperation. Economic pressure, trade agreements favoring progressive policies would make isolation costly for stubborn leaders. Months later, standing on the palace balcony overlooking territory that now bustled with unprecedented diversity, Adrian held his newborn daughter, while Aurelia recovered from labor that had been exhausting, but magical. Perfect. 10 tiny fingers, amber eyes that held hints of otherworldly intelligence, and when she smiled, flowers bloomed in window boxes without conscious magical direction. What should we call her? Aurelia asked, her voice soft with wonder at the life they'd created together. Hope. The name came to him complete and certain. Hope. Because that's what she represents. Future. Not just for their family, but for every outcast who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Beyond the palace walls, mixed groups of wolves and hybrids worked together on projects that would have been impossible under old systems. Children played without regard for bloodline purity. Love bloomed where politics had once demanded separation. Change. Real, lasting transformation that proved two hearts united could indeed reshape the world. As twilight painted the sky in colors of promise, Adrian pulled his wife and daughter close, breathing in the scent of home that no longer carried undertones of duty and sacrifice. Complete. For the first time in his life, everything felt exactly as it should be. The future stretched before them like unwritten pages in a story where love had already won.